Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to take a look at the question of how should a brand new fan approach watching the MCU for the first time? Should they watch it in chronological order or in the original release date order? It's a great question, and it's one that I think is going to come up more and more as the years go by. And in fact, it came up just recently on the Discord server. For those that don't know, the channel does have a Discord server. I'll put an invite down as a pinned comment for this video. Over 200 folks from across the globe chatting about MCU. It's a lot of fun. But as you can see, Electrospino was bringing up the question of, what order should we watch things? And Talon Wolf 1313 said, yeah, I've got a younger brother. I'm excited to begin showing him the MCU. I'm trying to decide the watch order myself. And it's really kind of cool to see so many, older brothers and sisters inviting their younger siblings to start watching the MCU. I invited my son to watch it and got him involved. Just more and more, this question is going to come up. So I personally believe that timeline order is the best way, not only on a rewatch, but even on the original watch. And I want to show why I think that's true. But I also want to say up front, whatever order you watch the MCU, you're going to love it. So if you're a new fan watching this video right now, I promise you it's worth the time to invest in the MCU. And I will have no spoilers in this video. I will do my best to avoid every single spoiler. It's going to be tricky, but I will do that. So yeah, let's dive right into this, and I'll share why I think timeline order is the best order, even for new fans. But of course, to do that, we have to decide, well, what is the timeline order, right? What I love about Marvel is, even from the very beginning, way back when Avengers came out, they started thinking in timeline order. This timeline was released, 2012, 2011 timeframe. Notice they even got into the years that things were happening, and they got into how much time there was between Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2. And then they get into this whole concept of Fury's Big Week, which we'll talk about a lot more, but they literally were laying out day by day when things happened. So Marvel has been one of those movie studios that has said, hey, we really want you to think about the order that things happen. Then in the 10-year anniversary, they came up with another timeline. This time they actually went for years for everything. It's a great timeline to follow, other than they did have a few mistakes. They admitted later Black Panther shouldn't be in 2017. It's really 2016, right after Civil War. And Infinity War is really 2018. But my bigger point is, hey, Marvel is again saying, we really want you to think about timeline and how it all lays out. In fact, we know we're going to get an official timeline book coming out in September of this year. Yay! I hope it has a great timeline, answers all our questions. I've got so many hopes for it. We'll see whether it even comes close. But again, Marvel is thinking in timeline. And then obviously, the best resource for new fans trying to approach the MCU if you want to go in timeline order is Disney+. Disney lays out what they feel the timeline order is. I'm always surprised by fans that discount this, saying, it's just some random person throwing stuff on a website. I guess it could be, but I personally think this is Marvel, and I bet you the timeline book is going to pretty closely resemble this timeline order. So if you're a new fan and you're just trying to decide how to watch stuff, check out this timeline order. However, if you want an alternate and still incredibly good timeline order, check out the Marvel Cinematic Universe Wiki. Oh my goodness, this thing is amazing. Not only does it go by year, it goes by month and even day. So yeah, I guess maybe a new fan might be a little intimidated going out to this wiki, but man, if you ever have any questions while you're watching something and you want a deep dive into what's going on, check out the wiki. And they do have, again, a very detailed timeline. It's a little different than Disney Plus's, but for the most part, it syncs up really well. Okay. So hopefully I've established that Marvel thinks timeline. That's just their mindset. Let's look now at the issues with watching in timeline order on a first watch and the benefits. Okay, we'll start with the issues. So what are the issues with watching the MCU in chronological order for the very first time, or even on rewatches for that matter? So I think this is a very valid question to ask. Is it going against the original creator's intent? If we're not watching it in the order it was released, so are we going against their intent? So I give a couple examples. Would you watch House of Dragon before you would watch Game of Thrones? Probably not. Would you watch the Hobbit trilogy before the Lord of the Rings trilogy? Maybe. I mean, you could. Maybe. It's not the order they were released. And of course, then there's the infamous, never-ending debate. Would you watch the original trilogy before or after the prequel trilogy? So I'm not going to get into any of these debates, although I leave it down in the comments if you want to discuss them. But my point is, you could argue the creators had an intent here. Whether it's the Lord of the Rings or Star Wars, where clearly they did 3 movies in a row and then went and did a new 3 movies. Or Game of Thrones with multiple seasons came out, obviously, before they then did the prequel of House of Dragon. So I think in these cases, yeah, probably you're going against the original creator's intent if you watch them in a different order. But what about Marvel? Are we doing that with Marvel? I mean, really, there's only 3 movies that are completely prequel movies, like came out well after, in the timeline, well after where they fell. So you got Captain America that is, in the 40s, but came out after several movies that come out. Captain Marvel in the mid-90s came out way after the 90s in the timeline. And of course, Black Widow almost has been panned for coming out after Infinity War. I won't go into why. New fans, no spoilers, but just trust me, a lot of people did not like when it came out. So I would almost argue maybe Marvel had, if they'd been given the chance, would have put some of these movies out in the right order. I don't think it's going against the creator's intent to watch these movies in chronological order instead of release order. Then look at the fact that we had 3 different movie studios even putting out Phase 1. Paramount, Universal, and Disney. Of course there wasn't a lot of cross-communication. So it's not surprising they aren't in the order that necessarily the creators originally intended. And I would even say this. Look at Fury's Big Week, which I alluded to Fury's Big Week earlier. They basically retconned it. They basically said, you should watch Iron Man 2, then the one-shot with Agent Coulson, a funny thing happened on the way to Thor's hammer, then Incredible Hulk, then Thor. I mean, basically Marvel said, our original order, that's not right. This is the actual order. So I would argue Marvel even said, hey, don't worry about the release order. It was wrong. We're retconning it. So it's just very interesting. I don't view it as going against the original creator's intent to watch it in a different order than release order. I think, honestly, if Feige were asked, and I don't know if anybody's ever asked him, that he would at least be ambivalent about watching it in chronological versus release. He may even think chronological is better. We'll see. Anyway, so those are some big reasons that I think we're not going against the original creator's intent. All right, are there any I am your father moments? Anybody that's watched Star Wars knows that if you watch the prequel trilogy before the original trilogy, you kind of have one of the big reveals spoiled, right? So are there any moments like that in Marvel, where if you watch it in chronological order instead of release order, you're like, I didn't want that revealed? My opinion, no. 0, none, nil. That is not a concern in Marvel Cinematic Universe, versus it is in some other things like Star Wars. However, it does segue into the next topic, post-credits. There are a few post-credit scenes that if you watch the movies in chronological order, you will get major, as in major spoilers. So, Captain Marvel, Black Widow, and Ant-Man and the Wasp, all 3 of those you should save the end credit scenes for later. So you might say, okay, how do I know how to do that? Well, I actually have a document on my Google Drive, and I will share it in a link that tells you specifically which end credit scenes to watch out for and when in the timeline you should watch them. Thank goodness it's only 3 movies out of 41 total entries, movies and TV shows. But still, you want to watch it with those. Then also on my same document, I go into why Captain America, the First Avenger, Thor, and Civil War, you might enjoy it more if you watch the end credit scenes in a different order. You don't have to. It's not a spoiler, but it might be more enjoyable. If you're going to go ahead and do it in chronological order, you may as well watch these also. So in the document, I list all of these and when I might recommend maximum enjoyment for you to watch them. But I would argue post-credit scenes might be the one issue with chronological order for your first viewing. Even second viewing, honestly. I think it's better just to watch them in a different order. All right. Then, this is a minor thing, but it really shocked me the first time I did a chronological watch. The opening credit scene changes are massive in Phase 1. I mean, you go from watching First Avenger to Captain Marvel. First Avenger is, you might remember the opening credit scenes with a comic book flipping and just really 2D image of Marvel. Then you go to Captain Marvel and it's like, whoa, this is a step up. Now, it's interesting because the opening scene happens to be the montage honoring Stan Lee. So there's no spoilers in it, but wow, is it a different experience to jump from First Avenger to Captain Marvel and then back to Iron Man, back to the 2D intro. So I'm only just mentioning that of artistically speaking, There are some differences when you watch in chronological versus release order. All right, so those are the only issues. I think they're all minor and avoidable. Now let's look at the benefits. There are so many benefits, I think. Okay, so the benefits of watching the MCU in chronological order, even on your first viewing. Phase 1 is so much more enjoyable. So first of all, let's talk about the Tesseract. And again, no spoilers here, but as long as you watch it in chronological order, it makes sense. When I watched it the first time in release order, I had no idea what was going on. I could not follow. So in chronological order, you get the first Avenger with the discovery of the Tesseract. You get Captain Marvel, where we learn more about the Tesseract. Iron Man 2, where he's looking at it in some diagrams. Thor's end credit scene actually makes sense. And then Avengers leads into Avengers, where the Tesseract has a very big role. Again, no spoilers. I'm just simply saying it actually makes sense when you watch it in chronological order. The Super Soldier Serum has more meaning. If you watch it in release order, you would watch Incredible Hulk before you would watch Captain America First Avenger. However, in chronological order, they're switched. And this storyline makes a lot more sense. Phil Coulson, I think, has a more meaningful story arc. I admit, the first time I watched him in Iron Man, I kind of ignored his character because I didn't think he was important. And then at the end, you're like, oh, wait, this guy's actually important. However, if you watch Captain Marvel and then Iron Man, you're really paying attention to him a lot more throughout Iron Man. So I just think his story arc works better. Speaking of Captain Marvel, it's just a better movie when you watch it way before some of the other things later in the release order. For example, in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1 or Guardians of the Galaxy, we meet a couple characters and we learn whether they have good or bad motives. I'm not going to say any more than that. But then if you watch Captain Marvel, which in release order happens after Guardians of the Galaxy, you know these characters. So when you see them, you already got some preconceived notions about them. However, if you watch Captain Marvel first, you have no idea what to think about these characters. So I just think it's better to watch Captain Marvel where it belongs, in chronological order. Also, Captain Marvel has some pretty major retcons, but you know what? They're not retcons if you watch Captain Marvel first. So they I'll be honest, they took away from the movie for me in that I was like, wait, that's what the Protector Initiative, or for those who know, a different name, it ends up being called, that's what happened with it? And then Fury's eye, that's what happened to his eye? I didn't like it as much when I felt like it was a retcon. But if you watch Captain Marvel before some later things, it's not a retcon. It's how it actually happened. So I just think Captain Marvel becomes a much better viewing experience if you watch it in chronological order. And then I touched on Fury's big week, but man, you gain so much more if you watch these in the order that they've been retconned to be in, instead of the release order. All right, Civil War. Civil War Fallout makes so much more sense. If you watch Civil War, then Black Widow, Black Panther, and Homecoming, Spider-Man Homecoming, you really see directly, right after Civil War, the impact on all of these characters' lives. It's a very important movie, but that can get lost when you don't watch the follow-up movies in order. Also, the Black Widow story is so much more impactful. Don't worry, no spoilers. I'm not going to tell you why if you're a new fan watching this, but if you know that it's much better to watch Civil War, then Black Widow, and then Infinity War. I actually think the viewing experience of Black Widow will be so much better for first-time viewers if you watch it in that order and not in the release order. The back-to-back movies are so much more enjoyable. Guardians 1 and 2, Far From Home and No Way Home, and then Infinity War and Endgame. I just think they're better back-to-back without all of the stuff in between them. I mean, the Guardians movies are only 3 months apart from a timeline standpoint, but yet they came out several years apart. And it's just helpful to realize not much has changed in their lives if you watch them back-to-back. And likewise, the same with No Way Home, which picks up immediately after Far From Home. And of course, again, not getting into details, but Infinity War and Endgame are much better if you watch them back-to-back. Then, okay. Oh, and by the way, if you're going to watch them back-to-back, hey, then while you're watching Guardians 1 and 2, you may as well watch the I Am Groots in the right order. Yeah, they're minor. You don't gain that much from them, but they're really cute. They're fun, and it's a better viewing experience if you watch them in their chronological order. All right, so I am not going to discuss the blip because that would be a huge spoiler, although anybody, even new fans, have probably heard about the blip by now. But if you haven't, all I'm going to simply say is release order, so much better handles the blip because you get WandaVision, then Falcon and the Winter Soldier, then Far From Home. But in release order, you get Far From Home first, and Far From Home is almost kind of laughing about the blip, which is fine. They're teenage high school students. Of course, they're going to kind of make fun of it. But really, you need to see the impact in WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Then you're ready to joke about it in Far From Home. And then my opinion, at least, and Disney Plus's opinion, is that Shang-Chi and Eternals happens after Far From Home. And honestly, if you watch in what I believe is timeline order, it makes more sense. You realize why Shang-Chi and why Eternals make more sense to be well after stuff like WandaVision and Falcon and Winter Soldier and Far From Home. So anyway, for new fans, trust me, don't Google the word blip. You want to be surprised. But you will enjoy the viewing order much better if you watch it for the first time, I believe, in chronological order. And then Phase 4, bless its heart, the pandemic really made a mess out of Phase 4 and some other factors too. But it is so much better, so much more logical if you watch Phase 4 in chronological order over release order. So you've got Black Widow and I Am Groot. Those are clearly prequels, so don't even try to watch them in release order. Watch them when they really came out. Watch them in the timeline order, not when they came out. And then I already touched on Far From Home was released before WandaVision and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but it absolutely happens after them. It makes so much more sense to watch it after those. Hawkeye, not as big of a deal, but Hawkeye was released before Multiverse of Madness, but Multiverse of Madness happens before Hawkeye. And it makes it a little confusing trying to figure it out if you watch it in release order. And then, again, smaller issue, but Miss Marvel was released before She-Hulk, but She-Hulk actually happens just about a month or so before Miss Marvel, but still, it's before Miss Marvel. So Phase 4 was so out of order, so out of order, mostly because of the pandemic and CGI issues and writers' issues, all kinds of reasons, but man, I really, really recommend watching Phase 4 in chronological order versus release order. All right, so there you have it. I think at the end of the day, there are so many benefits to watching in timeline order, and even if you only watch a couple of these things in the right order, like I would, if nothing else, I recommend watching Captain America, Captain Marvel, and Black Widow all in the right order. If you watch the other things in release order, fine, but by watching those three prequels in the order that they would have come out in the timeline, I think the viewing experience is much better. Okay, there you go. Let me know what your thoughts are. Did I convince you on timeline order, or do you have a preferred order yourself? Again, at the end of the day, whatever order you watch the MCU, you're gonna love it. So let me know in the comments what you choose to do. And then also, remember, we have the Discord server. Come out and join that if you're not already a member. We'd love to have you on. And like this video if you don't mind. Subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we can all continue to enjoy the ever-growing, ever-expanding Marvel Cinematic Universe.